Hi, I'm Joe, a Warsaw-based shooting instructor. For as long as I've had my MG42 Lafette sitting in my living room, I've often looked at it and wondered just how exactly does this crazy thing work? Well, I've finally decided to put my money where my mouth is, and today's video is the first in a series of videos that will endeavor to explain each of the Lafette's features and capabilities. But it won't be easy. For this task, I've acquired, at great expense, a number of German manuals, some translated to English, others still in German, only to discover that these manuals are nothing more but impenetrable walls of jargon and the most convoluted explanations of anything I have ever seen. To make matters worse, they often reference obsolete equipment unavailable to all but the most well-connected and well-financed collectors. It's also important to consider that the employment of the Lafette's more advanced features were typically carried out as parts of larger defense or attack plans, the coordination of which was taken out of the hands of the individual operator, who would simply be assigned Lafette settings that had been calculated by their superiors. With that in mind, my goal with this series of videos is to first answer the ground-level question of what is the Lafette, what does it do, and how was it used? Beyond that, I'd also like to impart in the individual operator of this equipment the higher level knowledge needed to utilize the full functionality of the Lafette. And I'd also like to explore how the Lafette could be used in contemporary circumstances, perhaps even with modern equipment in place of obsolete ancillary equipment, such as the aiming circle or the measuring triangle 34. This series may logically evolve into a subsequent series further exploring machine gun theory. Today's video will begin the series by giving an overview of the important parts of the Lafette and establishing an anatomical nomenclature that will serve as a foundation for subsequent presentations, so stay tuned. The terminology used in these presentations is taken directly from John Baum's English translation of the World War II German manual D-124/2 MG Lafette 34, Description, Operation, and Care. I've included a list of parts as well as a glossary of terms at the end of this video. The term Lafette generally refers to a gun carriage, that is, not just the ground tripod, but any device for mounting the weapon on the ground or on vehicles. Lafette refers to an assemblage of parts which contains a supporting mechanism for the actual weapon mount. The Lafette is not a mount because the mount is the part within the Lafette that holds the weapon. In addition to the field Lafette, the Germans developed many different mechanisms for holding the MG34 and MG42 on a wide variety of vehicles, including the horse-drawn MG Wagon 36, motorcycles, half-tracks, armored cars, trucks, tanks, or twin anti-aircraft mounts which could be carried in wagons or mounted on railroad cars, etc., many of which could also be, but not always, referred to as a Lafette. Post-World War II, the Bundeswehr continued to use the term Lafette with the new tripod developed for the MG3, along with several other mounting systems developed for a wide variety of roles, including the swivel Lafette, the aircraft defense ground aiming Lafette, and the free aiming Lafette. Note that the World War II and post-war versions of the anti-aircraft tripods are just tripods and not Lafettes. Also of note is that the MG42 Lafette is still compatible with modern German machine guns such as the MG3, MG5, and even the HK21. Here is a summary of the major part groups of the Lafette and the important parts within each part group, which we will look at in detail. The field Lafette consists of the following major parts. The lower Lafette, which serves as the frame for the Lafette and upon which the legs, extension tube post, swivel joint, and glideway are mounted. The upper lafette consists of the cradle and the reciprocating sled upon which the weapon is mounted, as well as the telescopic sight mount. The aiming and searching fire device, which allows the operator to control the elevation and traverse of the weapon, as well as depth fire. The Lafette extension tube 34, used for engaging aircraft or shooting from a standing position. And lastly, the two carrying straps for carrying the 21-kilogram Lafette on the back or shoulder of an assistant gunner. The major components of the lower Lafette include the frame, the swivel plate, the front leg, the two rear legs, and the middle brace. The frame consists of a three-piece welded tube construction upon which the extension tube mount, swivel plate, rear leg supports, bolt box, carry strap rings, rear legs, middle brace, and the glideway are mounted. The middle brace is the telescoping tube between the frame which sets the angle of the front leg. It's locked into position by the detent lever, and the inner tube features a series of dots along its length to assist in setting up the Lafette in a predetermined configuration. The bolt box is used to store a spare bolt and can be relocated to the right side of the Lafette if so desired. The rear leg supports are used to support the rear legs when the Lafette is folded and for hanging ammunition cans to put additional weight on the Lafette. On the front of the Lafette is the post for mounting the extension tube, as well as two mounting lugs for hanging the Lafette in the carrier of a transport vehicle, such as the machine gun wagon 36, where it would be stored horizontally on the back of the wagon on a simple claw mount. The extension tube post could also be used to hang an ammo can to place additional weight on the Lafette. Above that, we can see the spanner nut, which is used to adjust the spring tension in the recoil assembly with a spanner wrench. Next is the telescoping front leg, which, just like the middle brace, the inner tube of the front leg is secured by a detent lever and also features a series of dots that assist in setting up the Lafette. The front leg also holds the upper and lower back cushion pads. The lower pad can be adjusted by loosening the gripping jaw lever. At the bottom of the outer tube is a hook that engages the latch at the rear end of the middle brace to secure the front leg when the Lafette is folded. Note that World War II German Lafettes use leather pads, while Yugo Lafettes use canvas pads. And here we see the swivel plate, which the upper Lafette elevates and traverses on. At the rear of the lower Lafette, we see the glideway, which is the curved plate on the rear of the frame, which allows the upper Lafette to traverse from side to side. Its upper surface has lines graduated from 0 to 65, representing a total of 650 mils of movement, with an alignment mark in the center corresponding to 32.5 or 325 mils, used when zeroing or folding the Lafette. The glideway is also equipped with a traverse limiter on each side, the glide base slides along the glide way, and connects the aiming and search fire device to the lower lafette. It also includes two thumb rests to assist in more precise traverse adjustment. It mounts the traverse lock and also has a red alignment mark for reading the traverse graduations on the glideway. On the bottom of the frame, we also have the middle brace catch that latches onto the hook on the front leg when the lafette is folded, as well as two spiked feet used to stabilize the lafette when used in the prone configuration. Lastly are the rear legs, which are secured by the wing nuts, which clamp them into the sprocket plate. The sprocket plates are marked with graduations from the 0 through 5 to assist in setting up the lafette to predetermined configurations. Here's a closer look at the glideway, which is marked from 0 to 65, representing 650 mils of angular movement, with each mark representing 10 mils. And here we can see the alignment mark at 32.5, and here are the traverse limiters. Moving on to the upper lafette, the major parts are the cradle, which consists of the two U-shaped sheet metal rails connected at the front by a welded cap and at the rear by the removable end cover cap. Next is the sled, which holds the weapon and reciprocates in the cradle. And then the recoil assembly, which absorbs the recoil of each shot and returns the sled to its forward position. Starting at the front of the sled, we find the front mount, which locks into the front lafette mount at the bottom of the MG42 receiver. A spring-loaded lever unlocks the mount so that the weapon can be lowered onto it. Underneath the front mount is the recoil assembly, which consists of an adjustable spring held in a cylinder that absorbs the recoil from the weapon and returns the sled to the forward position after every shot. The spring tension can be adjusted with a spanner wrench. Moving on, we have the deflector plate, which deflects spent casings away from the lafette as they are ejected from the weapon. Behind it is the trigger lever, which drops down and engages the trigger when the weapon is placed on the lafette and pops back up when the weapon is removed. Moving on is the rear mount claw, which hooks onto the rear lafette mount pins on the receiver of the MG42. Turning next to the cradle, we have the telescopic sight mount, which holds telescopic sights such as MGZ34 and MGZ40. The mount can be adjusted for both windage and elevation by means of a cam and eccentric bolt. Lastly, on the cradle, we can see 4 bolts. These are eccentric bolts which hold the rollers that guide the sled and can be adjusted to suit the movement of the sled. Turning now to the right side of the lafette, we can see the trigger housing cover. This is simply a welded box with a removable cover in which parts of the trigger mechanism are located. We also have a better view of the deflector plate, and we can also see the locking wedges which lock the aiming and searching fire device into position when the lafette is deployed. Here we see the rear trigger lever, which takes its movement from the trigger lever on top of the searching fire device. Then we have the end cover cap, a removable sheet metal cap at the rear of the cradle. This is typically where the German maker's markings will be found, or in this case, the riveted data plate from the Yugoslavian army. The J&A refurbished many World War II German Lafettes post-World War II and also produced their own. The riveted data plate is one of the easiest ways to differentiate German and Yugo production or refurbishment. Some dealers will remove the Yugo data plate to reveal possible World War II German markings, but the 4 riveted holes left behind in the end cover cap bear witness to Yugoslav refurbishment. And here we can see on the left side of the sled the trigger trip lever, which actuates the searching fire device every time the sled recoils. Lastly, a quick note on optics. Be aware that some dealers try to sell the Yugoslavian ON M59 optic as a sight suitable for the Lafette, and while it does fit, the sight was originally intended for Yugoslavia's M57 anti-tank grenade launcher, and is of absolutely no use on the Lafette, starting with the fact that when mounted on the Lafette, the sight sits sideways from its intended orientation, so you couldn't even aim at anything with it, as the reticle is sideways. The end cover cap also contains the catch lever, which locks the aiming and searching fire device in position with the locking wedges when the Lafette is deployed, and hooks onto the locking lip of the aiming assembly housing when the Lafette is folded. And here we can see the locking wedges. The aiming and searching fire device allows the operator to set the traverse and elevation of the upper Lafette by hand. It also allows the operator to set the searching fire device, which continuously changes the elevation of the weapon through the movement of the recoiling sled in order to engage in automatic depth fire within pre-established boundaries. It connects the upper and lower Lafette and has the following major parts: the aiming assembly, which has the elevation hand wheel and trigger, and the searching fire assembly, which has the adjustment ring for setting the operation of the searching fire device. Starting with the aiming assembly, we have the elevation hand wheel and the elevation limiter levers. When the hand wheel is pushed to the left, the operator can freely adjust the elevation. When it is pushed to the right, it engages the teeth of the 2 elevation limiter levers. These levers allow the operator to set the elevation when controlling depth fire manually. Along each limiter, you can see markings 0 through 5. Each marking spans about 2 teeth, and each marking provides about 2 mils of elevation. So setting one limiter to 0 and the other limiter to 5 should produce a change of 10 mils of elevation. On the body of the aiming assembly, we see the overshooting table, and this is a Yugoslav version, then the wing nut brake for locking the elevation, and the locking lip, which the upper Lafette locks onto when the Lafette is folded. On the right side, we have the grip that the operator holds onto when pulling the trigger lever, which consists of an integral oil tube and brush. There's also a button for engaging and disengaging the elevation limiters, and behind that is the trigger lever. Moving down to the glide base, we have the thumb rests to provide more precise aiming, and the traverse lock. We can also see the alignment mark, the glide way, and the traverse limiters. Moving on to the searching fire device, we can see the adjusting ring, which is marked from 0 through 10. The 0 setting disengages the device from manual searching fire using the elevation limiters on the hand wheel, while settings 1 to 10 provide an increasing range of motion. On the side, we can see the ratchet lever, which is struck by the trigger trip lever on the sled each time the sled recoils, actuating the searching fire device. Looking at the front of the aiming and search fire device, we can get a better look at the trigger lever, as well as the traverse brake on the glide base, and we can see the rubber pad that rests against the middle brace when the Lafette is folded. And here we have the extension tube, which allows the MG42 to be mounted on the Lafette for standing while shooting at airborne or ground targets, such as when firing above hedges, cornfields, etc. It consists of a tube and a mount, which slides into either the middle or front mounts on the bottom of the MG42 receiver. The mount head can be separated from the tube and, according to the MG34 manual, placed directly onto the Lafette as another possible configuration, which I guess could be useful when firing from a trench, for example. To close out the video, here's a close-up of some of the carry straps in my collection, as well as the extension tube. When I bought the set, it came with 3 machine gun slings for some reason, but only 1 Lafette carry strap. Luckily, I was able to find another set. All 3 of these are Yugo issue, with the German straps being quite different in construction. Bergflack has written several articles documenting the minutiae of all things relating to Lafettes from a collector's perspective, so I recommend visiting his site, which I've linked to in the description. And of course, here's the extension tube and the mount. Machine gun mounts here, which swivels up and down, side to side. And here it has a serial number. And here's the button for the lock. Here's the tube. You can see the head. And again, button and the lock. And of course, this is a Yugo issue extension tube. And that concludes the first video in my series on the MG42 Field Lafette. In the next video, I'll discuss the different roles that the Lafette was intended for and the different positions that the Lafette could be configured in. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check out my machine gun instruction playlist and follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/SurviveWithJoe. Leave your questions in the comments and I'll try to answer them in a future video. Thanks for watching.